Good day, everybody. This is Kat from Cats About Town for TVC 22. Today we are going to have an interview that will be at times painful, at times joyful, at times inspiring, at times surprising. But of course, we're always looking for something that's going to teach us and help us realize the things that are not always obvious, but very necessary in this life. There are so many things that are changing. There are big changes in the world around us. Some of them we expect. Some of them we share with our neighbors. Some of them we don't expect. Some of them we don't share until we have no choice anymore. Please listen carefully to what my guest today, Eliane Cremati, has to say about her life story, and hopefully it will open your eyes and your hearts and help you deal with some of those unexpected moments that life brings us and that we hope will never happen to our children, but unfortunately they do and must never be kept in the dark or secretive. Eliane, would you say that that's about a fair synopsis of what this interview is going to be all about? Definitely. We've talked a lot. And because this is such a difficult topic and such an emotional one, it's not the sort of thing that we could leave to chance. So let's start, for those who don't know you and who will have the pleasure of getting to know you, as I have, start with your childhood, the early years.
Eliane was an only child of a family of immigrants and was raised with a lot of love and, I guess, good attention. And the attention she had was, I went to the best schools and was dressed very well, and that's the way my parents reached out to me.
Where were your parents from?
From Egypt.
From Egypt. You don't look very Egyptian to me.
No, I don't. They themselves don't look Egyptian. They're only born in Egypt, but they were from different nationalities. My father was Syrian. My mother was Greek, French, from France.
Oh,
yeah.
my goodness.
So it's quite a mix.
A lot of influences.
A lot.
So you were their treasured child, and you had all their hopes and dreams were poured into you.
Probably.
Yes?
Probably.
Did they come here after you were born?
They came pregnant. My mother was 8 months pregnant when they landed here in Canada, and they left in difficult times. It was when President Nasser had nationalized Egypt. So a lot of the non-real Egyptians had to leave. Okay. And they left with their suitcases, so they had to come here and start over, although they were well established back in Egypt.
And the idea was to make a better life for their child.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah. So they settled in Montreal.
Yes.
And it wasn't soon after that the dream started to fall apart.
My dream or their dream?
Your dream.
Well, I wasn't really aware that anything was falling apart as a child, because honestly, Eliane was still a happy child until she turned, I think, until her teenage days. She was always quite happy, always laughing and wanting to play and trusting, very trusting. And perhaps that was that was an issue.
So, just to make it perfectly clear, at 3 there was sexual abuse or abuse.
Yeah, it was.
And
yes.
you thought, as you recall, that this was normal, that this was acceptable, this was part of.
Yes, in a way I thought it was, because it came from family members. So it wasn't my father, but it came from people who were in my life constantly, daily, and my father's best friend, who we used to call my uncle, his son would always be over at my place because my grandmother babysat us from, 6-month-old until childhood. So It was normal. They were part of the family.
And then there was another incident later on in life?
So that went on with that individual, my uncle. It went on for many, many years. And then came into our life, on my mother's side, her first cousin from Greece came to live with us. And he was 24 then, and I think I was 11. Good-looking dude, a biker, pretty cool, and I thought, oh, I have a big brother right away because I'm an only child. I've never had brothers or sisters, so I got attached to him very fast, I guess. I mean, I don't have, to be honest with you, that's one thing. I don't have much recollection of my youth except some events. And with that, we reconstructed my story, right? So my cousin was with us. He lived in our house. And I remember we turned our dining room into his bedroom to accommodate him as a new immigrant. And it started with him. And it was a little different with him because he was a tough dude. Yeah, so it could be forceful.
But all the time, you didn't report it to your parents because you felt, again, this was just a continuation of the way it is?
As soon as I turned, don't forget, my father was quite a strict man. So there was some fear. If I was uncomfortable at that point, reporting it to my dad probably scared me. So I think that when I did report it to my dad, I was 13 years old, and it was because the uncle had crossed the limit, and I got scared and I got disgusted. So I reached out to my dad, but I was 13 then.
And who do you turn to at a time like that? There's no school counselor, probably. There's no friend that you can tell. You tell the person who's supposed to be loving you and caring for you. And the reaction was not what you would have hoped for.
Not at all. It was a reaction that designed the rest of my life. That was definitely, he told me that I must have provoked my uncle for him to do anything to me. Mm-hmm. That was unorthodox. So here I am. I gathered all my guts to tell my father. I was very scared. I'll never forget that day. That I remember crystal clear. And then he tells me, basically what he's saying is he can't save me, he can't help me, he won't protect me. And so it left a really bad taste in my mouth.
How different your story could have been if your father had decided that he was going to protect his angel, his only child. It could have been a completely different story. All it would have taken is for him to say, "Don't worry, I'll take care of it." But he didn't. So what happened next to Eliane?
She decided to shave her hair, shave her head. She had long blonde hair, and I rebelled. I started hanging around parks, smoking drugs, and confronted him a lot. I felt as if, later on I understood that if he thought I provoked my uncle, well, I'm going to show you what provoking is. Turned into a punk rocker and just had a, behavior that was very, not destructive, but destructive towards me.
Self-destructive.
Self-destructive, definitely. Yeah.
Were you in some way trying to teach your father a lesson that you are not his little angel anymore?
I think unconsciously I was. Absolutely.
This went on then, this lifestyle of yours, for many years, and yet at some point you snapped out of it.
Life has a way of, it went on for many, many years, and then my father got ill very quickly and died. Yeah, so he died, I was 20 years old. And I stopped everything. I stopped doing drugs. I stopped everything became, everything I was doing was not okay. I had to be careful because I thought he could see me. Strange, huh? But it saved me because I really stopped doing drugs, and I was being careful not to behave in erratically. Trying to be a good girl because Dad was gone, but he could still see. Strange. That's what it was. And then I moved away. I moved to Toronto, and oddly enough, both abusers reappeared in Toronto. And I really thought they were coming to help me because my father had died. So I thought one of them told me, I'll help you out. And I even moved into his house with his wife. And that's how unaware I was that was sexual abuse, that I had gone through with him. And then I was working for York University for the second language program. And I received a phone call from a mother of one of the students saying that her son had left a message saying that he was going to commit suicide. So she was concerned. And back then there were no cell phones. So most of the kids had gone out to a baseball game. I called security on campus. We went looking for him and got to his room and there was nobody there. So I was very relieved. But that had triggered something. And I was out of control inside of me. It's as if everything was coming undone inside of me, and I didn't know why. I was nervous, I was crying, and I was calling my doctor, and back then your doctor was also your psychologist. And I said, I don't know what's wrong with me. I had a sports car also, and I said, I'm going to drive off, and I'm not responsible for what's going to happen to my life. And he says, come down right away. And that's when we actually spent 2 hours together, going through all the events to understand that I had been abused, sexually abused, from the age of 3.
And at that point, total self-destruction seemed to be the only way out.
I don't know if it was total, yeah, you can call it total self-destruction, but what I think is inside of me, the silence that I was keeping, that secret, that humongous secret was buried inside of me and had to come out. That's what I think happened. And to save my life, yes. So with that doctor, we realized, I remember him saying, Mademoiselle Crématie, vous avez été victime d'agression sexuelle. Yeah, you were victim of sexual abuse. And I snapped out. That's when I realized, and I called him and I said, you've been abusing me. I remember being in a telephone booth. And of course he says, my love, what are you talking about? He said. Amore mio. That's what he said.
So that didn't end it for you, obviously.
No, that was the beginning. Because now I had to come to terms with the fact that I was a victim of sexual abuse, and I didn't want to be. I didn't want to have that label.
The whole impression you had of a happy life and a happy childhood, and you did whatever you wanted, you could do whatever you wanted. It seems almost as if the only person in your mind who had let you down until then was your father. That these other 2 guys really had not. True. They were just doing what guys do.
That's right. Mm-hmm. What guys do.
Yeah.
What guys do.
So how old are you at this point when you call your doctor?
I'm in my mid-20s. Yeah. And so I decided to come back home to Montreal. Yeah.
The illusion is shattered.
The illusion is shattered.
And you've got to rebuild the world. But you're going to do it.
Well,
no matter what.
I didn't quite decide at that moment, believe me. It took me, I think, until my 30s to really come to terms with all the cleansing I needed to do.
You were brought up with certain traditions, but the traditions were no longer solid for you or meaningful, so you were trying to create a world of your own, and of course flipping against it, but then you had to find a way back to what really works. And very often it is the traditions, but how do you come back to trust something?
Absolutely, so well said. Traditions out the door. I stayed away from family, and I rebelled a lot because I think I was very upset and very angry. Very angry that my family didn't protect me and didn't warn me and had raised me in a way where I thought, men could do anything and it was okay. And maybe I was naive on top of that, believing that they loved me, that each man that came into my life did love me. But there was a lot of anger, so it took a while to actually bust that abscess.
I think that's probably a story that many women and men possibly who are victims of abuse will recognize, that you somehow there's a part of you that wants to accept that this is okay, and that you are not a victim, because being a victim is such a weak state, is such a helpless state, so you try to accept it, and you can twist your mind into so many different ways, and finally you realize that, no, my heart is not okay with this.
No, you can't run away from it.
No.
It's always going to be there.
Fast forward, we're going to go through your journey, because I think it's very important for people who might not be aware or who might be facing it to realize that it can take a very long time, but the outcome can be very, very satisfying. And in the end, time is relative. So here we are, some 30 years later, and you are the happy owner of a beautiful ranch in Bromont, and you practice therapy with your horses. It's really the best revenge is success, they say.
Absolutely.
You feel it every day.
Well, I feel that I'm happy. I'm a happy human being.
So they couldn't break Eliane.
So no, they couldn't, and perhaps it took many years. But the truth is, I always, throughout my life, I've always looked for happiness. I wanted to know where it was. I traveled. I did the, geographic, what do you call it? When you travel a lot thinking happiness will be in, I lived in LA, I lived in Toronto, I lived up north in the cold on a native reservation. I tried finding happiness outside of me, and then I realized, that with time and with a lot of quiet moments around me, I noticed that it has to come from me. So it was right there. The happy child that I was still the sunshine, at 30, 40, 50. I just had to get rid of whatever was suffocating that sunshine, and it came out.
I think that's what Deepak Chopra calls searching for your bliss, right?
Searching for your bliss, indeed.
And I found it.
And I found it.
We're going to have to break now. And when we come back, we're going to talk some more about searching for your bliss. Such an inspiring thought. And it's there for everyone. And we will be right back. The journey that you undertook, your healing journey, essentially, which still involved a little bit of rebellion, because you don't break away from rebellion easily, because there's a sense of safety in chaos. And there's a sense of safety in chaos, particularly for people with borderline personality disorder, which you know a little bit about. You've outgrown it, but you are quite familiar with it. Through all of your therapy, was this borderline personality disorder something that was caused by what happened, or have you learned that it's something that you are born with?
I learned that it was caused by the sexual abuse at a very early age.
So chaos, uncertainty is all part of the lifestyle, very common to people with that condition.
Absolutely.
Which makes your life fascinating, exciting, but a little bit tiring perhaps, and there's a yearning for a little bit of safety, security.
Well, I always yearned for security. I just didn't know how to describe it. I didn't know how to identify it. But yeah, right now, we're yearning for peace and quiet. And going back to the source, going back to nature. This is actually what I realized was missing in my life. So life in the fast lane was not, fast cars and going out and partying and spending money, and was definitely not serving me well at all.
No.
No.
It's something that's identified more and more these days, that the lifestyle that's so common in our Western society, it almost makes you understand why Muslims are so angry at us, quite frankly. It's very destructive.
It is.
Not the freedom part of it. The freedom's
No.
good, but the pursuit of artificial things, material
Absolutely.
things, it's very unrewarding. You're this is slightly ironic, but somehow your search for stability landed you in Ottawa.
Believe it or not, this is where I found
in the federal
it.
government.
In the federal, well, yeah. It wasn't supposed to be the federal government, but I ended up working for the government, for our beautiful government. And thinking I was going to make a difference, and that didn't happen. I realized very quickly on that I was just a number. And I didn't take it very well. I actually took it to heart, as I've done all my life. I've taken things to heart. I'm a passionate human being, and I believe in the rights to freedom of speech and better treatment of women and equality, gender equality. And anyways, I ended up leaving the government. But while I was there, I realized there was still something missing in my life, and I turned to horses. But before actually making the move and putting all the puzzles together to identify and to realize that, yes, I'm capable of leaving the workforce, and I'm capable of letting go of this false security that I've built around me, fortress of material goods and appearances, and to get in touch with Eliane, to find her, take her hand and say, okay, where have you been for all these years? So it's a long road, but it's a fabulous road. It's a journey that, I wish upon everyone, and that's a bit what I'm doing, the work I'm doing, to really discover who you truly are meant to be.
So this work has taken you to this program of
Feel?
Feel? You can talk, yeah?
Well,
Tell us about Feel.
I Feel program is in Toronto. Yeah, I started researching on the internet I've always been with horses since I was a child. I used to ride. I started riding when I was 7, 8 years old, and went back to riding many times in my life, and then teaching. And you could see that the horses were, from very early on, my best friends. I just felt, although through all the years of sexual abuse, whenever I ended up at riding camps or at stables, I felt like I was with my best friends.
There's something to be said for that unconditional love
Absolutely.
and uncomplicated communication.
Absolutely.
But of course it takes a sensitivity on the part of the human being to connect that way and not try to.
Perhaps it does. But usually people who like horses are if you're not afraid of them, you'll very quickly on feel the connection with the animal. It's a majestic animal that mirrors most of the time, mirrors what you're feeling. So it's not whether you are sensitive or not, because there's also work that's being done with veterans and suffering from PTSD, and not saying that they're not sensitive, but they might have a shell around them. And to break that shell, you may place them into a round pen with a horse, and it doesn't take much time for them to bond with that beautiful being. So that's actually that. So again, just to say that the horses were recurring in my life, and I knew that there has to be something that I can do with a horse without riding it. It can't just be about riding a horse. And so I researched and found a program in Arizona, Epona, and I went to do my first workshop there.
What is Epona?
It's I think it's the goddess of horses.
The goddess of horses.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Epona was it was a program that really resonated with what I was looking for. It was incredible how it just all came together, and I knew at that moment this is it. I didn't know how I was going to leave the government to do this because you don't get rich on working with horses, that's for sure. And plus, I wasn't a psychologist or a psychiatrist. But that was a new segment in my life, another decade of finding out how to leave the government and establish myself. But again, there were layers. As I said in the beginning, there are layers. So with working in the workforce, with working for the government, came about confrontations and injustices and being expressive as I am, and I rebelled even in the government. I wanted to, bring forward all the injustices that were made towards the employees, and so there was more healing to do there as well, and accepting.
So now you're fighting for the cause of horses. You're rescuing horses. You're using horses for therapy for yourself and for others.
That's right. That's right.
You had mentioned to me this Authentic Journeys also. Is that part of that same program?
Authentic Journeys is a center I've created. And why do I call it Authentic Journeys? Is because authenticity is what we're trying to go back to. Becoming authentic, really who we are. At least for me, that's how it was. And the journey to get there is sometimes a long one, but a rewarding one, because to discover who you really are and how beautiful you are, no matter what happened to you, no matter really what people have done to you or what you have done to others, you are still a beautiful soul. And so the center is offering a place to, actually a retreat center. It's a place to come and together with friends or not. Could be, I have a lot of women in the workforce in Montreal who are looking for a weekend to come and spend between 2-3 friends and just hang around and do some activities close to nature. So we have trails, we have the horses, we have ponds, we also have, you can get a massage under a tree, just to connect to nature. And then there's a walking path that takes you to a beach. It's a place where you're going to commune with you and nature, and with just the sounds of nature. That's all it is.
And there is a hunger for nature in all of us, obviously.
There is.
Now you are also familiar, in fact, I don't know, do you call them clients of the Nova Center?
Yes.
Is that also associated with
the center?
The center?
No, it's not, but it could be. Mm-hmm. It could be. Actually, Nova, in my case, it was Calac.
Uh-huh.
Calac was in Ottawa, and then they have some different locations, and they're under Nova.
Okay, and Nova works with women as well,
Also,
only?
Nova works with women who have been sexually abused, whether in violent relationships or as children. Yeah, it's a great center that I turned to not too long ago also, mm-hmm. To get assistance and moving forward. I had a lot of things to look into for my business, and before I moved from Ottawa, I also wanted to discuss. I needed some support, and they were there for me.
The journey never ends.
Never.
It's like children when when you're on the beach and you see little children running around, 2-year-old, 3-year-olds, and they run off and then they run back to mom for resourcing again, and then they run off and they come back. But you always have to come back. We all need a place that we can come back to, where it's kind of like Sam's Bar.
Yes.
Where everybody knows your name.
Yeah, okay.
Sort of. Alcohol doesn't need to be involved, but of course it helps break down barriers. So many of problems that I think happen in society are because we're looking for a way, we're looking for a connection, we're looking to communicate. And when that communication is twisted, when that communication
Breaks down.
is rotten, when that communication is not what it should be, then things fall apart, and then you keep looking for another form of communication. And you've obviously found them. So how do you feel about a society today where it's certainly not news, and it's yesterday's news and day before yesterday's news, where so many kids and adults are isolated behind their computers? Is it a frightening prospect for someone who has tried to deal with things on your own and yet?
Well, I choose not to see things as being scary anymore, frightening. I see that there's a lot of us doing this work, and I think that what's happening is we're evolving in a way. We're reaching out to society, and the fact that there are so many of us that have trained to do the work with the horses, I see it as it's going out rampant because the demand is there. So we're going to have all these people come to us and reconnect with nature very soon. They're actually coming already. They're actually reaching out, and parents are seeing that it's just not working. We've got kids with cell phones at 7, 8, 9 years old, and they're in their bubble, and they don't speak anymore. They end up being 16, 17 years old, and I don't think they've said 3 words to their parents besides hi, bye, and we're seeing it. We're definitely seeing society reach out and reach out towards going outside more, going through nature, spending some time with animals. So I'm not going to focus on, I don't like to focus on the negative, and
but we have to focus on the obvious.
we are. The obvious is, well, what you're saying is that the obvious is that yes, there's a breakdown in communication,
Right.
Absolutely, but at the same time, there's a movement going on, and we can see it with the social media.
Yes, we see it with the social media, and there are so many. I subscribe to this, I don't even know what you'd call it, a daily newsletter online. It's called Godvine. And of course, Facebook, the streaming. There's always something about animals, always something about dogs, and they're the ones that people go to when they need a lift.
Yeah.
So maybe we should be bringing more animals into schools. Maybe we should be bringing more.
And it is happening. I mean, you're seeing the programs with not only the horses, but the dogs being taken to prisons or to hospitals, to retirement homes. You're also seeing the horses, miniature horses. I mean, you're seeing the animals are doing their part on this planet right now. Definitely.
We're letting them do it. They're no longer a status symbol. We're learning to appreciate what they are.
There's an opening for that.
Yeah. Good point. Good point. Now, you have made your journey. You have found your bliss. Anyway, you found where it is, and you keep going, looking for it. Is it possible that you might never have taken this journey if the abuse hadn't happened? This is not something I want you to answer right off the top of your head. I know you've thought about it, but I think it's got to be something that we talk about at more length, so we'll talk about it when we come back from the break. This is not to say, this is not in the same category of you brought it upon yourself, you invited it. This is, do we need shocks in our life to make us think about where we're going? You okay with that?
I'm fine.
All right. Hope you are too. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. So Eliane, here we are talking about what is perhaps one of the most difficult parts of the whole process of healing, is how much of what happened to you that was bad was an instigator to something that turned out good? How much of what was bad remained bad and you could not overcome?
It's a good question, and it's a tough one to answer. To say that if my path hadn't crossed the adversity that I had gone through, I would have been a different person, perhaps. I know that I would have been less shameful. I would not have been living my life thinking less of who I am, and trusting. I would have probably trusted human beings a little more, a lot more, because these are the two elements that I'm still working on. Being ashamed of what happened, how I behaved, the types of relationships I got into, and not trusting. It's hard to get in relationships, not only love, just friends, trust that, because I give 300% of who I am. I'm still like that, and now I have to gauge myself and learn and study the person and take a step back. These tools I should have had when I was young, obviously, to observe and go home and just study before getting all excited and say, oh, I found a best friend and I'm excited and we're going to build a thing together. And so it's just take a step back, take a deep breath, and just ground yourself. And so if I don't know, because I really can't answer that I would have been different, but I think that I would have probably, I don't know.
But you have had to grapple with the issues of shame, guilt, trust, which probably at some point everybody does, but it's easier to just forget about it. Okay, I'll trust when I feel like it. I'll be ashamed, but I can rationalize it. I'll be guilty, but it doesn't really matter. But for you, it became part of your life, of your everyday life. And
it did, because of the nature of the event. Sex at such an early age, and promiscuity. How do you pronounce it? Promiscuity? Promiscuity.
Yeah. Promiscuity doesn't exist anymore, so we can forget that
I know
word.
that. I was going to say the generation today. It doesn't matter.
No,
it really doesn't matter. I mean, I should have been born now.
Yeah.
I would have been okay. I was in comment on dit, before my time, ahead of my time.
There you
That's
go.
what I was. Yeah. I mean, it's nice to look at this now and laugh about it, but there were years of beating myself up on the head and being suicidal. Years of not wanting to continue, and suffering from extreme PTSD. Things will trigger and be triggered constantly, especially in relationships, especially if there was a breakdown in a relationship. That would be tragedy. It's complicated to explain, because you're not in my body, in my mind, in my brain, but feeling the loss of control in a relationship, feeling not being able to be loved. Am I going to be loved? If I actually, get involved in a relationship and share myself entirely, truthfully, be transparent from, the moment I wake up to the moment I go to bed, whether it's, sexually or the whole thing, and then risk that the person's actually going to walk away or lie to me or cheat on me, it's horrific.
It's not just a bad movie, it's actually something that...
It was drama. It was very painful. So I turned to psychiatry and looked at it and understood that it was with cause. I mean, there was a reason why I was like that. It wasn't because I was crazy.
Now, extreme emotions like that do affect your physical well-being. In fact, in in Chinese traditional medicine, there's always a link between any kind of strong emotion and a physical part of your body. You've had to deal with certain physical problems as well?
Yes. Yes, I got very ill following an emotional breakdown. And I couldn't walk for a couple of years, 2.5 years. My severe inflammation in my body, the whole immune shut down. So I started by having shingles, and I had mononucleosis, then my liver was too enlarged and fat. So you could see that the body had absorbed was actually reacting to all the emotional trauma. And I had to get cured for it also.
And? You got cured?
I am, of course, I got cured. I started cleaning, first of all, the internal work that I was doing on myself, being with nature, learning how to cope with events. I also got some tools, going into group therapy. I did a few group therapies that were extraordinary, where they give you toolboxes and you learn how to cope. First of all, you understand who you are, why you are like that. You're not crazy. You've gone through trauma, serious trauma, reoccurring constantly in your life with all the relationships that you had and so on and so forth. So then you end up with a toolbox that you can actually use when you're at home and when these moments get triggered again. And then that's mentally. And then physically, well, I also learned how to eat properly, drink properly. Now, I'm not perfect at that because I still eat a lot of sugar. So I have some work to do, but I'm doing the smoothies and the vegetables.
But you're aware.
Totally
which is
aware.
one step more.
Totally aware.
We were talking about the water that you're drinking. We were talking about how extreme emotions can affect the purity of water, the water crystal. Any child, you as a child, is like a pure crystal, and the things that come at it shatter that perfection. The thing is that it can be brought back. Mm-hmm. It can be brought back. It can be done through therapy, as you went through. It can be done through faith. What is your suggestion? What is your recommendation? Is there a shortcut?
I don't think there's a shortcut.
No.
I really think it's about getting silent, finding a place where you can actually accept to listen to what's going on inside. Stop running away. And I turn to something, I believe in something stronger than I am, definitely. Therapy was great, yes, because it gave me the tools as personality-wise, right? How to cope with life, how to cope with events, how to cope with society. But as far as
coping is not thriving.
It's not thriving.
How did you step from there to thriving?
I started letting go. Okay. Letting go and trusting. Trusting that there was something stronger than me. And with me, it started with a tree. It started with nature. I started trusting because I had a hard time with God, because I was raised as a Catholic, right? I went to French convent school, and so I had trouble with God because he took my dad away when I was 20. Where is God if my dad's, So I had to start with nature, and I started seeing birds and leaves and flowers and trees, and I started trusting. I saw the beauty in nature, and I realized that whoever created this planet, it's got to be really beautiful. Look at the planet we have. I'm not saying the inhabitants, I'm saying the planet we have. So this is how my faith grew. And I still believe in the source. I don't mind calling it whatever, God, Allah, I don't mind because I am Syrian Greek. But to me, it doesn't matter. I can pray as much to Buddha that I can pray to, God. So, and that's what I've been doing. I have a ritual. I do a gratitude journal every day. Every morning, the first thing I do is write a gratitudes. I thank the life for breathing, for waking up, for seeing the sun, my horses, my dogs, my cats. And that actually has just, it's dipped me into extreme light and love. When something doesn't go right, and believe me, on a farm, it's daily. There's something that breaks down, or, I know that it's going to, if I have faith in that strength, then I know that it's going to get solved no matter what.
You mentioned earlier that this is a beautiful planet, it's a beautiful world. The inhabitants, the human beings on it are not so great, and I think anybody would have to agree that we've done quite a number with it. Mm-hmm. And I think so many people are wishing it were different, wishing that they knew how to make it different, but so many were stuck in the rut, in the routine, it's afraid to change. Mm-hmm. The change is happening to us. We're not making change happen.
Why can't we be the change?
Exactly.
And that's what I'm trying to do. Right. Because I was part of those inhabitants. I wasn't pleasant for many years. I mean, you may have seen me and think that I was, but I had anger issues. I was unhappy. I was miserable, and I could be, not pleasant. So I saw that I am responsible for everything I create. If I entertain thoughts of negativism, of hatred, of jealousy, of, against my abusers, well, what am I going to attract? And I really put that to a test. I did it because in a relationship I was in, I was very insecure, and I thought the person was going to cheat on me, and it happened because I thought of it so much. It happened. So it's the same thing. I mean, that's a really petty example, but I think that if you entertain... But
a very common one.
A very common one.
It's definitely worth
mentioning.
If you
entertain negative thoughts constantly in your head, and we do. How many thoughts do we process per day? Apparently millions or hundreds of thousands of thoughts. So, and all of those, when I started doing my inner work, I saw that a lot of them were fear-based. Mm-hmm. And I had to transform that and say, no need to be scared, and talk to myself. So coming from a place of love, and this is what the work is all about with the horses, coming from the heart instead of coming from the mind and the ego and the personality. Mm-hmm. So this is where the change had to happen. And if we go back to what you had asked me originally, would my life be different? Well, if just to be the person that I am today and aware of what I know and what I'm capable of doing as a human being, well, I'm kind of glad that, my path was what it was.
Yeah. Well, you would have definitely been a different human being, because that's simply the way it happens. You might have been a better human being. You might have been able to do more good. We won't know. We won't know. What I do believe, and you probably do too, is that we come into this world to learn certain lessons and to improve ourselves. And you are only too familiar with what you've done for yourself. But I think that for all those people who are going through struggles and who are caught in their guilt and shame and not loving themselves and wondering why they should even try to improve themselves, what would you say?
Reach out. Reach out. And why? Because you have no idea. Once you are free from those chains of fear and those chains of shame, once you break free, you are liberated. You are liberated, and the world is your oyster. You can fly around and do what you want. You can actually become what you've always wanted to be. Whether it's, an astronaut at 50 is a little hard, but, you could still, there's, just for the internal, the emotional satisfaction, to know that I don't have to be scared anymore. I can share what happened to me, and there's people out there to listen and to, give me tools and help me out, and I will be free. I won't have to live with a veil around my hair, my face, out of fear, out of shame. It's freedom, It's freedom, and you're going to help somebody else. And isn't that what it's all about? That's what you're allowing me to do by being here, is to share my experience so we can help whoever's out there. That is the biggest gift.
Well, that is the best that we can do. We're all witnesses to the same drama of this world, and if we can bring our own perspective into it.
Absolutely.
When you don't have faith, how do you talk yourself into doing these things?
I try not to eat a chocolate cake. No, I'm just kidding.
That is an excellent analogy.
When I don't have faith, the days that I don't have faith. Well, you know what? I can say I have one or two good friends, at least one. I call her my angel, Kathy, and I'll reach out to her in a text, and we support each other, and we write to each other and say, we try not to fall into the negative. Honestly, I found that by staying in the beauty around me, recognizing all the beauty, it takes work to get to that point, of course. If you are in the ruts and if you haven't come out yet, I won't give you that suggestion. But in my case, what really helps me is not to feed into the negative.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I think that it's part of our native tradition, North American native tradition, and I'm sure it's part of so many other traditions, but let's go with the one that we're in.
Yeah.
And the story of the grandfather and the two wolves, it's obviously one that anybody can understand. Eliane, it's been a difficult interview. It's been a difficult interview because we're talking about things that we realize so many people will say, yeah, so what? And yet, I think even more people are saying, really? Really? Can I really get out of this mess? Because that's the worst thing, when you're in your mess and you're feeling like you're alone and nothing makes any sense. Your candor and your humor and your painful experiences have really ended up with this Eliane who's sitting here, that I can see the little girl with the shining eyes and the joy. And it's so good to know that it didn't die, and it's so good to know that that kid in the university didn't lead you down the wrong path, that your doctor was there. All it took was just the right person at the right time.
Absolutely. And that's why, if I may say, that when we're reaching out and to whoever is going to be watching this, if they're in a situation where they want to come out and speak, it is at a different level, but there is hope. There's hope, because you managed to understand what I'm going through. You didn't experience it. So imagine if somebody else is living through it and they reach out, they will find answers. They will be heard, and there is lots of hope for them.
There is, because that's the way the world was made.
That's the way it was made, and that's what's great about this world.
For that, Eliane, I hope that many people will listen to this and pass the word and know a little bit more about the Nova Center and the Kalak Center, Authentic Journeys.
That's right.
And the FEEL program, and basically come out of this a little bit better than when they started listening to this program. Because for anybody else out there who's another Eliane, we do want to hear from you. We do want to share your story. And really, we all want to work together because we are all connected.
We are.
So with that, I bring not only this interview to a close, but also this season to a close. Have a wonderful summer, everybody. See you soon.